So this is one of my 7x12 tie beams. I need to go through and cut. Well, the first thing, obviously, you see this is a rough edge. So I got to go through and straighten this up and get me a nice square edge. And then I can go through and square everything else up and get my measurements and cut everything to length, cut my tenon, etc. So first thing I'm going to do, go through and again get me a nice square edge on this. So what I'm going to do is measure my length. I'm going to cut this to proper length for my tie beam that I need. Lop off the excess on the other end. It's going to give me a good square edge up there. All right, I'm going to plane this down. All right, that's going to give me some good flat surfaces to work with and square this timber up. And then I'm going to come back and cut my tenon here. Okay, so, all right, so next thing I'm going to do is plane. This is my Triton. It's a 7-inch planer. It's not a Makita or a Mafel, but it does just fine. I have to make a double pass on my wide beams, and I had a rodent get a hold of it. I'm going to have to go through and replace the power cord, but she gets the job done. So it's loud. So let's get started. Safety squints and hearing protection. So I've gone through, planed it. I've cleaned up the rough surfaces. In general, I've got a fairly flat, even surface to work with. I'll go over that and why that's important later on. But next we're looking at doing my tenon. All right, so that means I've got a tenon. It's going to be a centerpiece here that I'm going to leave, and I'm going to cut off the excess on the both sides of it, so the outsides here. The most common method you will run into is people will do what's called a drop cut. So they'll take the saw, start at the top, and drop the saw. They're going to cut down. Now, I have seen people also go through and do slats. I call them slats, but they go through and they'll come in on the side and they'll take the circular saw and they're just going to cut a whole bunch of little grooves here, and then take their mallet or whatever, bust them up, and then take the chisel and go in and clean that up afterwards, maybe a plane as well. I have never had that work on a tie beam. My tie beams are big. Typically mine are going to be, you see right here in the heartwood, you see the grain, it curves right here. What I have found is if I do that, it will bust up along the grain. So that means in the center I get a curve. So I've got this little curve here along that grain. Really pretty curve there I just drew, by the way. But you see the point is that when I bust it up, it tends to bust along that grain, and that means I don't have a good clean flat surface in there to work with. So it's a lot more cleaning up and chisel work to get that flat and get it 2 inches all the way through. So I've done that in the past, and that just seems to me to take longer to clean up. So I'll do a drop cut and then finish it up with my hand saw. And that's the other, and I don't have it set up, but if I'm ever doing a lot of these, is a chainsaw mill. You can pick them up off eBay I think I got mine for $49. With inflation, it's probably double that now. But literally, what it does, it rides on top of this, and you get a chainsaw that will come down and cut into the wood. Like you were trying to make your own boards just with a chainsaw. If I got a lot of them, production-wise, I'll set them up and just use that, because I can do one side, flip it over, and do the other. And once I get the depth right on the chainsaw, I'm good to go. I can go from beam to beam to beam and knock them out, and there's virtually nothing for me to do. There's no handsaw work. I can get it to where really it's just come in with a slick and shave that down and clean up the rough surface on that, and she's good to go. Honestly, that is faster if you've got several of them to do. But one or two, I'm just going to do my standard drop cut like you're going to see me do here. So just a little heads up there about how I do mine. So let's go ahead and mark this off and get started. So in this case, 10 inches. I'm going to house it 1 inch, so that gives me 9 inches. All right. Marking it across, this is my stop gauge. I'm going to go do the same thing over here. I'm going to mark it down my sides, because I'm going to have to come in and cut my sides in a minute. All right. Dead batteries. Be back in a minute, folks. All right, and that is it. So what I've got to do now is I'm going to flip it over on its side and take my handsaw and just cut her up. I'm going to have to come back in when it's on its side, and I'll take my circular saw and go to cut to that line, and that block will just come straight off. So stick around, I'll show you the finished product. All right, and that's it. I'm going to come in with a hand plane and my slick and clean this joint up, but that's how I do my tie beams. I've still got to go through and do my spline pocket up here, which I showed in a previous video, how I do that. But other than a little bit of cleanup, make sure it's solid 2 inches all the way through. That's it. Appreciate it. Y'all have a good one.